So, hello everyone. Welcome to our Bread and Net session 2024. This session will talk about facing threat actors, spyware technologies, and companies. The title is about a hidden war between the cables. Since the context of this Bread and Net session, it's about digital rise in periods of war, in times of war. Recently, in the last few years, we have noticed a lot of things going on in the tech sphere, specifically in the digital rights sphere, about the propagation of spyware. Many instances has been detected, notably the NSO spyware, NSO Group, sorry, that had a notorious spyware called Pegasus, which targeted many civil society dissidents, journalists, and some high political figures. So today we will talk about how to effectively combat such threats, some threat strategies that has been used for detection and reporting. We'll go through understanding what a spyware is, some case studies that have been reported, some detection techniques that has been adopted by the civil society, how reporting works for mechanisms about the spyware detection, and also some of the censorship technologies that has been available and reported, some technological solutions that has been made available publicly for the civil society or whoever wanted to test if they have been targeted, how policy and advocacy are very important in order to combat the propagation of such technologies, how we could build capacity as a civil society, how the different organizations worldwide are collaborating to fight spyware, and the role of civil society in doing that. Today, we have our three invitees, Brian from CIPESA, he's a technology officer, Paul from Social Tech, and Donaka, the head of security lab at Amnesty International. So we will start this session by some questions, especially identifying and explaining what a spyware is. And we will start with Paul. We will have a question to Paul about what constitutes a spyware and how does it operate.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for this invitation and to all the participants here. Yes, spyware usually could be mentioned or described as a piece of software that can access to many as possible information in a device. So it could access to your contacts, your camera, your microphone, your documents stored inside your device. This thinking that this spyware could be designed for cell phones, but also there are other kinds of spywares for computers, for example, so they can read your email, what you type on your keyboard, and all the possible data as an user could see in the computer. Also, I started mentioning that it is defined as a software, but usually spyware could have more components because the spyware itself is this software, but it requires many other things like an infrastructure to have people operating this spyware, sending some commands, retrieving some information, and sometimes it requires other kind of technology to do the intrusion, the attacks, to do the infection. So at the end, when we talk about spyware, we are talking about a complete suite of technologies on piece of different components to do an attack, to do an intrusion, and to have a software that can access as of information as possible in a digital device like a computer or a cell phone. And these kind of technology are very intrusive because it means that they are monitoring everything that you are doing on your device like your cell phone or computer. I think you are on mute, Raheb.
Thank you. So thank you for your input, Paul. Could you please elaborate a little bit more about why spyware is dangerous and the invasive nature of spyware, and why does it constitute a potential issue for civil rights?
Yes, as I mentioned, these kind of technologies could access to basically all your information on your device. This could be the information that you are storing there, but also other things that you can access, like your email, your social networks, or other things. So basically, can access to everything. And this, sadly, we know that around the world, these kind of technologies have been used to monitor or to spy civilians, I don't know, some journalists, some activists. So at the end, this kind of technology should be used for national security issues, but it's being used against activists and journalists, civil society. So this start to become an issue because this technology are used by governments or companies against these groups that I already mentioned. And basically they are using it because these groups are touching their interests in terms of money, in terms of politics, in terms of influence. So these technologies are being used as a way to oppress some people, to oppress some groups that could make a balance in society, or to push the governments or the people in power to do what they should be doing, their work as politicians, as people that make decisions. So this is becoming a problem because there are not clear regulations or laws around the world to acquire these technologies, to define how to use it, when to use it against some people or some groups. So basically, we are in a very difficult moment because there are a proliferation of these technologies, many vendors, many products with different prices that are being acquired by different governments from different regions. And all of this misuse, it's happening all the time. Almost all the evidence is telling what I mentioned, that this is being used against activists, journalists, or civil society groups. So yeah, this is creating a imbalance of power in society right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul, for these details. I would like also to highlight on specific instance, notably the NSO Group spyware, because it got the most coverage on in media actually, and it's called Pegasus, and it actually illustrates one of the real-world impacts of such technologies. This has been worked on massively by Amnesty Tech Lab, and this is why we have Danica today here to explain to us and share some specific instances and demonstrate a real-world impact of such a spyware.
Thanks, Reb. It's great to join you here today. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that this session is made up only of male colleagues working on surveillance research. I think this is problematic, and it's important that we talk about it. At the Security Lab, we're actively working to diversify and decentralize the pool of researchers and technologists who are doing digital forensics work, especially through our Digital Forensics Fellowship. We want to make sure we're all working to rectify this ongoing lack of diversity, and we are seeing more groups, especially groups in global majority countries, and more diverse groups working to help do forensics and device checks on people in their own communities who might otherwise be underserved by this. After this session today, I would recommend that you all read 2 articles highlighting the excellent work of 2 of our colleagues, Alex Stefanasou and Nicole Yanez, to learn more about their approach to digital forensics. Both of these individuals took part in our Digital Forensics Fellowship. As you have said, Pegasus spyware has been used around the world, in many cases to target civil society activists and journalists. Pegasus is, of course, not the only spyware out there, but it's one where we have the most knowledge about and have the highest number of cases. So it does give an insight into how these tools are being used. I can think of a couple of concrete examples. We saw just a few months ago in February, Access Now, working with Citizen Lab, published a groundbreaking report which identified at least 35 people in Jordan who had been targeted by the Pegasus spyware. This included journalists, activists, lawyers, and union activists working on workers' rights. When the spyware targets people's devices, it can have an enormous invasive impact. It basically opens up people's entire inner world, almost their thoughts, to the person who's doing this kind of surveillance. What I do think we need to realize is that the impact of surveillance technologies can be different on people depending on their existing privilege or their marginalization. We know that women and LGBT activists have a different and in many cases more damaging effect from being surveilled on by such tools. We've seen cases in Azerbaijan, for example, where Khadija Ismailova, a prominent investigative journalist, has been kind of harassed over years by the government for working on showing corruptions by the Azerbaijani authorities. She was jailed for this work, and then later, after she was released from jail, she was targeted over years using the Pegasus spyware, where they could access all kinds of sensitive personal information, including their photos, their messages, most intimate information. And we've seen quite a few cases in Azerbaijan where people who have been targeted with Pegasus have been threatened to stop their activism, and especially women activists have been threatened that if they don't stop their activism, that their intimate photos may be leaked or published on Telegram or published in the media, and they're using shame and access people's personal information to try and intimidate them, especially again using these kind of tactics against women and people who are already marginalized. So I think it's really important to keep these facts in mind when we think about the impact of surveillance technology. Later this week, Amnesty will be publishing a report focusing specifically on gender-based harms and the harms for surveillance technology on already marginalized groups. And so you'll be able to see that on our website later this week.
Thank you, Danaka, for your input, and thank you also for raising the issue of having a only male panel today. We took this into consideration, but unfortunately, we were not like our colleagues were not able to attend this session. And I think it's very important actually to take this into consideration. So thank you for your input. And thank you also for sharing these instances and your information about the spyware detection that you previously had encountered. I would like also to ask you actually about like how would these cases and like the cases of breaches impact actually both on individuals and societies. We talked about LGBTQ society, we talked about political dissidents, we talked about journalists, and we could understand that it's a privacy breach for individuals, but how a spyware technology or whatever technology means put in place concerning surveillance could impact societies.
Thanks, Reb. So it works twofold. As you say, there's of course the extremely personal impact on the people who themselves are targeted, which can be very severe and cause a lot of emotional distress and can be extremely harmful for the individuals targeted. But we also know that this kind of invasive surveillance can have an enormous chilling effect on wider communities and groups of activists in civil society. I think the total lack of accountability and transparency around how these tools are used makes it very difficult for anybody to know whether their phone is indeed targeted with spyware such as Pegasus or if they're safe. And because people are always stuck in this limbo of not knowing, is it safe or am I under surveillance? There's incredible pressure and chilling effect to deter people from communicating, deter people from organizing, deter people from sharing their thoughts and having freedom of expression or freedom of assembly when they live in this kind of climate of digital repression, or even the fear that it could be happening.
Okay, thank you, Danaka. So clearly, the fact that you mentioned that Amnesty will have a report by the end of this week, it means there are some ways and means of detection of these spywares, right? Or like different technologies related to surveillance or censorship. So I would like to talk about like some of these effective methods for detecting spyware with Brian and Paul to explain a little bit to us like how this kind of detection techniques work. Where do we start? What are potentially the methodologies applied? How we start doubting that there is potentially a new technology emerging and that is actually functioning as a threat. So, Donaka, my question to you is, what are some of these methods for detecting spyware?
So it's always a challenge, and this is a kind of arms race. So every time us in civil society, Paul and other partners find ways of detecting these kinds of attacks, the states using such spyware, and as well as the companies who develop it, are always trying to do a better job of cleaning up the evidence, of hiding any traces or forensic clues that can be used to get accountability for abuses. And so it's always a challenge, and it takes a lot of collaboration amongst various partners, people who understand the local context, who are well connected with communities who are most affected by these threats, and also collaborations with people kind of outside the world of civil society forensics. We need to work with journalists. We need to work with whistleblowers, other individuals who may have information or understanding of where these tools are being used. I think at the end of the day, it can't be down to, we're never going to be able to find all of the cases of surveillance because by design it's secret. So we need to work on also putting in place regulation and accountability to make sure that any states who misuse these tools and any people who are victimized by these tools have avenues they can go to try and stop the harm, stop the abuses, and also to make sure that there's consequences for actors who violate human rights or contribute to human rights violations.
Okay, so here we are talking about the secretive aspect of surveillance technologies, including spyware, or it could be also like censorship. I know our colleagues at CPESA has been working on that. So I would like to jump to Brian and ask him what are some techniques of detecting surveillance technologies that he has encountered as well. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Raheb. Good evening, and thank you for having me here. Yeah. So I work for CPESA, the technology officer. CPESA, we work to try and improve the use of ICTs towards improved developments and livelihoods of citizens. We have seen the use of spyware in many sub-Saharan countries, especially in many countries, especially when it comes to context, critics of governments and political context, where most spyware has been utilized. We've not been able to collect enough evidence-based data to be able to particularly point to the use of particular spyware, though we've gotten reports of journalists and activists who have got notifications that their devices have been targeted by spyware. There's also an example of a lawyer who his device was stolen, and then when they're trying to use Find My Device, the location showed that it was in a military installation. So those are some of the examples that we have seen where we've known that the people that are using spyware, mostly state agencies that are targeting critical journalists or activists to try and silence them.
Okay, thank you, Brian, for this input. So if we understood well, there is some sort of a cyber arm race concerning acquiring this kind of technologies, surveillance. Could it be censorship, surveillance with spyware, or other means, right? So this idea about secrecy behind it, I want to jump back to Donaka about this note. So we know as cybersecurity technologists that spyware is basically hard to detect by itself. But the more challenging part is that secrecy should be a part of the detection as well, because once we detect a spyware, it will change its form. So it's like it couldn't be detected after some time if it has been revealed as a potentially breached technology. So it's known, now we can see it, there are fingerprints, we can monitor it. So the monitoring is quite the cat and mouse chase, right? and we are always like following up on this. So this is very hectic and requires a lot of efforts and resources, because you need some reverse engineers, you need some people that are 24/7 available in order to monitor devices, receive cases, analyze devices, analyze network monitoring. So, and I know that Amnesty has put a tool, very notorious tool, actually, I would say, that has been very efficient in detecting several technologies. It goes from adware to spyware. It covers a lot of use cases. It could be like government targeted campaigns, or even domestic violence detection. So like somebody spying on their partner. So what are the technologies and tools that are available right now among us, Danuka, to defend against spyware?
Thanks, Rahab. It's an excellent question, and this is something that's, I should say, is always evolving. But I'll try to give an overview. So with spyware research, quite often, unfortunately, we're not necessarily blocking the attack in the first place, but instead we're at least looking for evidence that the attack has happened afterwards, and this evidence can then be used to try and get some accountability and make sure that attacks don't continue in the future. So this evidence is valuable because if you can show an individual is targeted, you can then put pressure on the government who may be responsible. You can put pressure on the company who has produced it to put in steps in place that they don't contribute to human rights violations. You can put pressure on the exporting company to minimize the harms. And of course, you give knowledge to the individuals targeted and their communities that this is a threat that they face and that they should take precautions to try and mitigate, reduce the impact of such surveillance. At Amnesty, we released a tool called the Mobile Verification Toolkit in 2021 as part of the Pegasus project. And this tool is designed to make it accessible for more civil society technologists to check devices that they suspect for signs of known spyware. So at the time, we published indicators, kind of a fingerprints for how to detect Pegasus. And since then, we've updated it with kind of fingerprints and detections for the Predator spyware by Intelexa, by triangulation spyware, and other surveillance tools that threaten civil society. Unfortunately, with such a public tool, as you say, it can be helpful in many cases to broaden the scope because anyone using the tool can potentially find evidence. And through MVT, we found some of the first cases in El Salvador, some of the first cases in many other countries by people kind of outside of the spyware research community identifying cases. But unfortunately, this the success of MVT or the usability of it decreases over time as it'll only detect what's kind of publicly known. Once we publish new indicators or new domain names linked to spyware, the threat actors and the spyware companies will try to change those. So if there is people out there who are worried about spyware attacks, I think it's important that you reach out to reliable experts and civil society partners such as Paul at Social Tech, Access Now's Helpline, Citizen Lab, Amnesty, who are able to guide you through checking your device against maybe non-public indicators or new ways of detecting, up-to-date ways of detecting spyware such as Pegasus. As there's a risk if people just use something like MBT, they may find a threat, but they may also miss some threats that are not included in the public list. And this is unfortunately just a natural constraint where we're working. Working in an environment where the adversary, the spyware companies, will read anything public, read any report, and try to avoid being detected.
Thank you, Danuka. So yeah, effectively, it's quite a hard task, right, to be able to actually publish this available information. So it's only related to trust connections within the civil society organizations. So you mentioned Social Tech as a partner, Access Now, SMEX as well. We have been doing some forensics and enriching our database with some private IOCs. What I would like also to talk about specifically with Brian, because he mentioned that he has been focusing on ICT, because there is this MVT tool, which is a tool that is made for, I would say, for people who understands a little bit of computer forensics and mobile devices forensics. I would like also to talk with Brian about what are the other tools that are available. I know there are some software that will facilitate some kind of detections whenever it's public, some protocols, privacy-focused apps that could actually limit the impact of such potential campaigns. So would you like to talk to us a little bit, Brian, about these kinds of technologies?
Thank you, Raheb. I can maybe speak about some tool that I have used. So some of the tools that I have been able to use, there's the PTS toolkit, and I've also used there's a tool that was developed by one of the developers of Outline. It uses the VPN and Wireshark tool. Why I'm more interested in such a tool is it gives you the ability to monitor network traffic, to do network traffic analysis for a person without having to get their phone, and that is one of the issues that we see here. Most victims will not come out to say, in case they suspect, they'll either reach out to you, but they'll not be willing to give you your phone, give you their phone so that you can be able to do a more detailed analysis. However, with the use of such tools to be able to monitor their network analysis, we're able to see if we can get some IOCs or detect any anomalies that would either use that as an alert or be able to share with partners like Access Now or Amnesty Tech. If there's something that we notice that is not usual, like a connection to an IP address that has been flagged. So among these other tools, that there's the emergency VPN tool that I think is publicly available. Most tools require a certain level of expertise, and also because of the limited capacity gap that we have in our region, that has turned out to be a challenge.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So I noticed that there are some questions. There's a hand risen, right? It comes from the host.
Yes, hi, Raghib. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for your input. I'm just going to ask the speakers to please raise your voice a little bit so that the sign language interpreter can hear you clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I noticed also that we have two questions from in our Q&A session. So one of them, it's speaking about Jordan and Pegasus. How old are the cases, and what kind of spyware is the Jordanian government using against protesters? I think, Danaka, you are the most expert in this subject to answer to it.
Thanks, and good question. So I just put a link in the chat to the recent report in February from Access Now, Citizen Lab, and also there's cases there from Human Rights Watch as well, where two Human Rights Watch staff members were targeted with Pegasus. So in this case, if I recall correctly, the attacks were from 2019 until 2023. As far as I know, Access Now has not attributed the spyware to the Jordanian government. One problem, one difficulty with spyware research is it's often very difficult to get, forensic evidence to tie a particular attack to a government. There's never, a contract that's included with the spyware attack. So we're just looking at kind of clues and, contextual information about who are the people targeted, who might be interested in trying to surveil them. Sometimes we'll see that, the people who are being spied on by a certain spyware are also being subject to criminalization by a state. Maybe they're getting stopped at the border. Maybe they're getting their funding cut down. I think it's important to remember that spyware used against civil society is almost never used by itself. It's is often used as a tool by states as part of a broader campaign of harassment or surveillance to target critical voices and people who want to speak up for their human rights.
Okay, thank you, Danaka, for answering this question. So I would like to go back to the different parts of facing threat actors, right? So clearly, in order to enrich the database of detecting spyware, we need some kind of a reporting mechanism, because without instances, monitoring is quite limited. So we need like somebody raising their voice saying, I think I have a problem. So a lot of how can reporting mechanism, this question will be for Paul. How can individuals and organizations effectively report for suspected activities on their devices?
Yes, thanks, Raheb. It depends. Actually, right now, Apple are sending some notifications to iPhone's users, notifying that probably their devices could be a potential target. Obviously, it depends on the context of these persons. If they are potential targets for their governments in their local context, they could receive this kind of notifications. When this happens, they can reach some organizations like Access Now that are mentioned in the notifications through their public helpline. So Access Now has different partnerships around the world with organizations like Amnesty Tech, Citizen Lab, or local partners, so they can help to get this support when someone receives this kind of notification. But this is like an outlier for many people, as this is only for iPhone users and it is not a standard right now. For people that are using other kind of devices that don't have this kind of notifications, it's complicated. Usually the spyware is not something that you can see very clear, or you cannot identify easily, as now because they are very silent when they are operating. So if you have this idea or you are suspicious about your devices, the first step is to contact a confident and trusty organization in your local context that can help you to review your device, to do a basic support, to identify if there is not something happening like a hardware problem or a misconfiguration. If this local partner identifies something strange, then they can try to do basic forensics on the device, like using some tools like MBT and emergency VPN, or this PTS project, the Pyro project. So doing this kind of assessment could help to identify if there is a kind of low-level threat, probably, or something higher that could require more in-deep collaboration with other organizations like Amnesty Tech. So the idea that I want to share with you is that you need to do a triage, we say it in Spanish. So you can try to identify if there is something, if there is a problem, but a common problem with your device. If not, then you can try to identify a basic threat like a common malware that could come from an ad or a strange website, but it is not targeted. And if all the things seems to be a targeted attack, then you can reach with other organizations. So that could be like the roadmap for these kind of efforts. As Donaka mentioned, they have in their published website a contact form, so you can try to reach with them or your local organization or other partners like Access Now.
Okay.
SMEX, also SMEX.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm actually happy that you mentioned the legal channels that we actually need to talk about, because individual journalists and dissidents who are potentially suspecting to have been targeted, they need some kind of a legal guarantee, and this legal guarantee it's only ensured by some kind of organizations and digital rights organizations for now. And the fact that most of people are not necessarily knowledgeable about this, so each organization is covering probably a specific use case, a specific region, about the different cases that they have. And people ask actually like, how do I reach out? What is my legal guarantee? And this question is for Danica to understand how they have been dealing with different cases like internationally from a legal perspective. So what are the procedure? Are there like any avenues of collaboration with different cybersecurity experts, notably the cybersecurity industry? How things are happening behind the, I mean, away from keyboard.
Thanks for the question. I think it's good to think about, what tools we have for campaigning, for advocacy, and try and get accountability for cases when people have unfortunately been targeted with spyware. So this does depend quite a bit on the various legal jurisdictions where the person is based and what kind of accountability mechanisms are in place. And to start, I'll say, unfortunately, in almost all jurisdictions, or the vast majority of jurisdictions, there is poor to no effective accountability mechanisms in place. With the use of spyware, we have to acknowledge that in most cases, the spyware is being used by the state, either the police, intelligence services, or another agency of the state. And of course, if somebody is targeted with spyware and then they go to the police asking for an investigation or asking for accountability on this, unless there is good surveillance oversight mechanism in place, most likely they're going to get stalled. They're going to not get any meaningful answers or transparency around why they were targeted and how. We've seen this in Hungary, where there's no effective accountability. We've seen this in Poland, where they also obstructed investigations. And we've seen this in many other countries where people have taken legal actions to try and get accountability. I think it's still important to do this. I think it's important to put this evidence on the record. It can be that even if it's not helpful in the local jurisdiction, it can be helpful to show that the local legal protections aren't sufficient and that countries shouldn't be allowed to grant export licenses to sell spyware and surveillance tools to countries such as Azerbaijan, where there's a history of surveillance abuses and there's no effective oversight and transparency. We'll also see more potential at kind of regional legal forums to get accountability. I know there's an ongoing process in the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and Court on Human Rights to investigate the use of Pegasus spyware in El Salvador, in Mexico, and in the Dominican Republic. There's also a process going on in the Council of Europe looking at where spyware has been used there. I think most welcomely, in recent months, we've seen a new government come into place in Poland, which has a history of abusing spyware tools. And now under new government, there is rapid action to both identify and notify people who have been targeted with Pegasus spyware, and also try to bring some potential criminal action or legal accountability on the officers and the people working for the government who authorized the unlawful invasive surveillance previously. So I just say that as a message of hope that even if right now people are being spied on and they don't see much avenues for accountability, having these cases on the record, having forensic data to prove it, can help to get accountability and justice down the road.
Okay, so clearly there's a big need for policy and advocacy groups to actually push for addressing the proliferation of surveillance technologies, right? So my question to Brian is, how can international civil society organizations push for such policies? Because clearly there's a lack of local laws that actually force or regulates this kind of technology exportation, like Danica mentioned. So my question to Brian is, how can advocacy groups contribute to addressing these cases, notably the threat actors and the spyware industry or market, let's say?
Thank you. So the best way advocacy groups can push for this is to try and push for the regulation of the use of spyware. I know it's probably difficult to try and ask governments to stop using spyware, but if we can push for better laws to be put in place to make sure that there's actually transparency on the use of the tool or why they are going to use it, so that in case it is used illegally, then whoever has used it is held accountable. And that's the best way that advocacy groups can work. However, the challenge is being able to collect as much evidence-based data to support this advocacy. That's where the biggest gap is. So being able to collect as much data, even if yes, it's going to be difficult to prove, like Donega has said, to prove. Because most of the institutions using the spyware are going to be state-sponsored to prove or hold them accountable. Having that data available would be good to be able to show. You can reach out to international court systems or to the sellers, the dealers of the spyware, to be able to restrict the selling of the spyware to nations or states that are misusing it. So I think that's the best advocacy that we could do.
Okay, so jumping back to this, I would like to ask Paul, like if you could maybe give me your few ideas about what specific measures could be advocated to strengthen these privacy regulations, because clearly spyware technology, it's a breach of personal privacy, and how we could potentially cooperate and promote international cooperation in combating such technologies.
Yes, these kind of technologies and threats share a lot of common things in different regions. So I think even if we are from different parts of the world, we are facing the same issues as they are using to oppress some groups, some people trying to do some changes. So yeah, basically the first step from our side is to start to identify these common things that we are having right now because of the misuse of these technologies. And also in terms of politics, I think from our perspective too, that we are sharing the same kind of issues with our governments, with our economics, with some social problems, with obviously some cultural difference, but at the same we are facing similar issues. So considering this, the way that we are creating these kind of collaborations is sharing these issues and trying to identify what could learn from others that are working good in their places, and then start to figure out how to apply it in our places. That for local incident, local advocacy, local policy, but also at the same time, as we are understanding us better, we can try to define better policies or better advocacy campaigns to push this from a global perspective. At the end, sadly, many of the countries that are suffering of this misuse are based on the south side of the world, and this has very specific challenges in terms of the south perspective. So we need to develop this kind of perspectives from the south and the global perspective, considering these common issues. And at the end, many of these issues are related to human rights defenders, to journalists, to freedom of speech. So yeah, I think we can figure out how to work together from the south side, but also with other international organizations like Amnesty, Citizen Lab, Access Now, that are very open to do this collaboration and have the expertise in the technical side, but also in the policy and advocacy side.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So what I understand from your answer is that there are some lack of capacity majorly in the digital rights sphere. Speaking of lack of available expertise, lack of tech activists that are fully engaged or have the potential resources or skill set in order to combat for spyware, including also policymakers and also people from the like from the different organizations that actually push for such policies. So one of my questions would be what initiatives are underway to empower individuals and organizations to protect themselves against spyware? If it goes from detection, we know that MVT is one of the initiatives made by Amnesty Tech, but on a more methodological level, are there any initiatives, Danica, that are underway to give this skill set or abilities for the digital rights defenders?
Thanks for the question. So I think this is a very important issue because we know all over the world, many communities are being affected by these kinds of tools, and not all of communities are connected with global North organizations or have the resources currently to investigate and protect themselves against these kinds of attacks. So there has been a lot of welcome progress over the last couple of years to grow the field of people with skills to do digital forensics, skills to do advocacy around the abuse of surveillance technologies. Most recently, this has been promoted by the Spyware Accountability Initiative, which is a new fund established by the Ford Foundation and OSF, with funding from a range of sources, including Apple, OSF, Ford, and others. They're now starting their second round, and this has given funding to a lot of emerging groups, especially groups in the global south or global majority countries, to build up their capacity to work on this really important issue. At Amnesty, we've also been running our digital forensic fellowship for the last number of years now, where we'll partner with 5 technologists from different regions and work to upskill technologists with technical skills, how to do forensics, how to investigate spyware, how to do reverse engineering, and then hopefully to help spread and reshare this knowledge with their communities. And we're already seeing a lot of impact from this knowledge sharing and community building.
Thank you, Danica. So yes, international collaboration is clearly something that we actually need in order to enhance the detection capabilities and actually to collaborate, because people on terrain are more able to observe the cases than on a distance, right? So there are always also some political aspect to it and also a little bit of capacity. So there is a big need for international collaboration. So my question for Brian is about this precisely. Why is a cross-border cooperation crucial to tackling global threat of threat actors? And how could it actually help global South organizations in tackling and detecting such technologies? So how is it important and how could we tackle this problem, Brian?
Yeah, thank you for that question. My colleague Paul has already mentioned that we face similar, what should I call them, similar issues or similar techniques that are being used in spyware technologies. And for example, from Paul's experience, they have dealt with a couple of several other different types of spyware tech. And in my experience, we haven't, but this global cooperation will be able to offer an opportunity to learn and also to share solutions and technology and tactics on how we could mitigate the effects of spyware or be able to stop in cases a trend of specific spyware that has been used in most global South countries don't have the funds to customize spyware, so they end up trying to reuse something. So global cooperation is one way that we would be able to equip civil society or activists or people working against spyware to be able to have the knowledge and experience to deal with any new spyware tools. Secondly, if we are talking about the development of strategies and policies, using the international mechanisms that are available, collecting evidence from one region and using it to either to put ties or diplomatic sanctions on countries that are using, have evidence of the use of spyware. That would also be another mechanism that could be used to fight the use of spyware.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So I understand from your answer that there is a big important part of information sharing among different digital rights defenders group. And this question will be to Paul. Can you please discuss the importance of information sharing, why joint investigations among different organizations is required, and in order to address this issue of threat actors, despite the technology, is it surveillance, censorship, or spyware technology? So how information sharing is important for this, how joint investigations is important as well.
Yes, information sharing is something crucial for this kind of collaborations, as we have many different perspectives. For example, Social TIC, the organization where I work, is a local organization. So we have a very close collaboration, a directly collaboration with human rights defenders, with journalists. So we are doing directly support, and we know very well what are the threats that they are facing or the issues they are suffering in this moment. So we know from first collaborations this kind of knowledge. And this is something very local that probably some other organizations in different countries could not know from Mexico, but they could know from their regions. So sharing this could let us know, as Brian mentioned, to learn from others, to try to identify some things that we have in common in terms of techniques, tactics, procedures from the attackers. And also at the same time, this could be a kind of input for other international organizations that probably are not working so close with the people that need this support. So we can try to exchange this kind of information, what the local knowledge with some international knowledge or other more advanced capacities. For example, in terms of forensics, that probably some other organizations with better funds or better support could develop better methodologies or strategies in terms of forensics knowledge or advanced knowledge that probably local organizations are not developing because we are busy in other more not in other issues that require to respond quickly for the needs of the people that we are working. So at the end, we are working in the same issue with different perspectives or different capacities. And the idea of the sharing knowledge, it's not just sharing knowledge, it's also sharing resources for the teams that you have developing better strategies, or the teams that you have doing this directly support with journalists or activists. So the idea of sharing knowledge, it's also sharing resources and learning together. And at the same time, we are facing this from different perspectives. Like, okay, probably I don't have the technical skills, but someone like Donaka could have it. But probably Donaka is investing some time in one thing that I am not doing, but I can give him some other information. So all of these can help us to understand us better, to understand better the needs of the people that we are working, and also to have a better use of our own resources as NGOs and as a civil society.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I think it's very important what you mentioned concerning the international collaboration and specifically the expertise exchange more than the information sharing by itself, because information could be available and it could change. So we actually need to follow up a specific methodology or a process by which different concerned civil society organizations could actually benefit from the information shared by being a contributor and also by being I don't know if I could say it, like a consumer of this information, like use it while they are detecting the cases that they have. So there is clearly a big role for the international civil society about that. I mean, awareness has been risen lately about this kind of technology, especially by the massive campaign Amnesty has conducted. So my question will be for Danaka, how different organizations could actually contribute to raising awareness and advocating for change concerning surveillance technologies.
So there's a few different demands on how to improve and stop the harm from surveillance technologies. So many organizations have signed on to the call for a global moratorium on the sale, use, and transfer of spyware and surveillance technology until there's a global human rights compliant regulatory framework in place. This has been agreed to by hundreds of civil society organizations. It's also been recommended by the UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression, David Kay. So it's basically calling for to stopping the sale of spyware until there is an effective legal protections in place. At Amnesty, we're going one step further, and we're calling for a total ban on what we call highly invasive spyware. So highly invasive spyware is spyware that has kind of complete access to a device, can access all of the data without any limitations on the quantity or the time period it accesses. And also highly invasive spyware is spyware which does not have any trace or kind of it's designed to be kind of undetected. And so there's no means for independent analysis and checking that a device has been compromised with this kind of spyware. This is a problem because having invisible or almost invisible spyware makes it very difficult to get accountability and to document cases where it may be abused. And so there's a real temptation that it gets used illegitimately and broadly far beyond the purposes that are legitimate under human rights law, such as being necessary, proportionate, and for a legitimate aim. And so more organizations are supporting a call for a ban on highly invasive spyware, as we've seen time and again that such tools are so damaging to human rights and so open to a wide-scale abuse that they should be banned outright.
Okay. Thank you so much, Donaka, for your input. I think we went through the different aspects of the spyware technology and how civil society has been fighting against that, basically, because it's clearly a breach of privacy and it has different implications among society, international law, and there's actually an emerging threat that has been rising more and more, especially with the arrival of new tech. So one of the worries that I have is AI. So potentially this spyware could also be much more invasive later on with the coming years. With this question, we end up our session today. I will open the place actually for questions. If any one of our attendees has any potential question to Donaka, Brian, or Paul. So I noticed that some of the questions has been already answered. Thank you so much, Brian from CIPESA, Paul from Social Tech, and Donaka for your availability from Amnesty Tech Lab, for your input and for your perspective. We hope to see more of your work and more of your fighting for the digital rights and against the proliferation of surveillance technologies. Thank you so much for your availability. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to join.
Have a good
Have a
day.
nice day.
Bye-bye.